more hours. So we have about 7 more speakers with still some more incredible content. It just goes on and on. It's just as diverse as the audience is. So I would like to introduce our next speaker, Kevin Coffey.
Yay!
All right, and now I'm going to give his bio, and then you can clap again. Kevin Coffey earned his BS in mathematics at UC Berkeley and his MA in communications at Cal State University Northridge. For several years, he was the primary coach for a youth speakers program sponsored by Toastmaster in Lockheed Martin in the Antelope Valley area. He was also a Toastmaster for many years and earned a spot as a regional finalist in the Toastmaster International Speaking Competition. Currently, he's an adjunct faculty member here at West LA College teaching communications. His talk today is entitled, "What Public Speaking Can Learn from Mathematics."
Thank you, Kel, and welcome back from lunch. I hope you had a great one. Since my time is short, let me get right to the point. Mine is actually a plea. Mine is a plea to those who teach like myself and those who practice, just like everyone you've heard on stage so far and those who will follow me, who practice contemporary public speaking. That's right, I said public speaking. That formalized oral communication being taught on college campuses, or as most people know it, that activity they try to place at the very bottom of their list, right below being sick and just above being dead. Now, loathing aside, formal public speaking has a more serious problem. Outside of talks like this, formal public speaking is rapidly becoming the modern-day Latin. That is the conceit of a few and the language of almost no one. At this point, I want to ask you all to stay with me for a moment, because I'm going to take you someplace. You all want to stay with me for a moment?
Yeah!
There you go. Then let's go. To the choir. Now, there are those that argue traditional formal public speaking is a valued talent. And perhaps they're right. If you look at almost any job posting, somewhere it says the strong ability to communicate orally and in writing. Yet the oral communication they seek is not the ability to give a formal structured speech, like what I'm paid to teach. What industry really seeks is the ability to communicate information and ideas across many channels and to diverse audiences. More and more, the audience for formal discourse is shrinking. And it's shrinking even among academics. Think of the audience for classical music as opposed to pop music. Beethoven, Beyonce. Each has their merits, but there's no doubt today who has the larger audience. So if public speaking is to engage the public, it has to change. And there's a couple reasons for that. First, once upon a time, there were 3 great pillars of communication. That first pillar is called logos, or logic. Think of Mr. Spock. Any Trekkies in the house? No? Okay, move on. The next pillar is pathos, emotion. Okay, I got nothing for that. And finally, there's ethos, the credibility of the speaker. Well, now, it's just pathos and ethos. Today's audiences have voted logos off the island. In short, there's been a shift in our epistemology. Simply put, just what justifies our belief in something. Today's public communication is one that has its epistemology in the sensuous. You feel me? Currently, what feels right is right. Walk around almost any college or university campus today, and you'll hear more about what students feel than about what they think. In fact, feeling has almost become a proxy for thinking. Now, like I tell my students, don't get it twisted. I'm not suggesting this is problematic. All I'm saying is that this is the current reality. And for those of us who teach public speaking, not to recognize this reality is to unknowingly educate our students in an art that once spoke to many, but now just speaks to few. And it's this few that raises the fundamental question of what an audience is today. The question of audience is the second reason public speaking has to change. Now, traditionally, an audience was thought to be those who are physically present when a message is delivered. However, this notion of audience was replaced by two communication scholars, Chaim Perlman and Lucille Taiteka, in their book, The New Rhetoric. In their book, they define audience as the ensemble of those whom the speaker wishes to influence by their communication. This definition by two seminal scholars in communication expands greatly the definition of what an audience is. This definition wasn't immediately apparent as technological restrictions still mostly limited audiences to those who were present when the message was delivered. Currently, excuse me a moment. Currently, as we look compulsively at the screen on our phones, technological restriction is no longer an issue. Today we have to ask, are YouTube viewers an audience? What about Instagram? And as a speaker I heard earlier today, what about Snapchat? Facebook Live? Don't worry, it's not a quiz. The question's rhetorical because the answer is, of course they are. The bigger question is, for advocates of public speaking, is, are we creating structures and teaching techniques that allow for the effective communication across these channels and to today's audiences? Sadly, I don't think so, and that is problematic. Now, in keeping with today's theme of creativity, one possible solution to this problem with public speaking is that we as teachers and practitioners of public speech enact the maxim, good artists borrow, but great artists steal. And as great artists are, I suggest we steal from what might seem an unlikely source. Public speaking can steal a page from mathematics. Now, mathematics is not often viewed as the most creative endeavor, with its strict rules governing formal structures, proof, order of operations, and the like. But mathematics, of course, once you get used to the word problems, is in many ways a creative endeavor. Let's take, for example, plane geometry. Plane geometry. That stuff we had in middle or high school, it's a geometry based on a flat surface, like this stage here. And plane geometry also has a set of what's called axioms. That's simply unproven principles from which the entire system is constructed. Now, for centuries, we were cool with plane geometry. Until this guy, get his name right, George Friedrich Bernhard Riemann asked, what if parallel lines, you know, those lines like this, what if parallel lines met? Excuse me. Can I talk to you for a second?
Yes.
What I just said over there about, you know, Riemann and parallel lines meeting, that really didn't happen. He really didn't say that. He said something slightly more complicated. Okay, he's a mathematician. He said something a lot more complicated. But that little story about parallel lines meeting makes for a much better story than what actually happened. However, Riemann did ask, what if our geometry was based on a sphere, a ball, instead of a plane, flat surface? And if you could have geometries based on a sphere, what other kinds of geometries could there be? It's this kind of creative speculation that's now required for the teaching and practice of public speaking. Instructors and practitioners of public speaking should, like Riemann asked, what other formal structures could public speaking take? The basic introduction, thesis, body, and conclusion, along with its relatively formal language choices and straightforward presentation, it served us well, like plain geometry. Yet to remain relevant, public speaking must also develop new kinds of structures. Now, to our credit, some creative transformations are already beginning to take place. For example, instead of a single presenter on stage like myself, we're now beginning to present more in teams or groups. But what about more adventurous creative speculations? What if there were no thesis in our presentations? In formal speaking, this might not make any sense. People would say, what's your point? What are you talking about? Your audiences won't understand you. This is all nonsense. It's useless. Maybe. But the same was said of a geometry based on a sphere. It was called an academic curiosity until this guy, you might have heard of it, Albert Einstein, saw that this geometry described well a theory he was working on, a theory later known as general relativity. Let me quickly do a couple more. What if, instead of you've heard of a prose poem, you have a poetic speech? Or even technical communication that's structured and sounds like spoken word poetry. Both might remain a kind of curiosity until someone, maybe someone of you out there, discovers a communicative application for it. And finally, what if we make the performance of the message as important as the text of the message? Well, we've begun to see this in the extensive use of props and ever more creative PowerPoint and other mixed media applications. Now, some say this is a form of dumbing down the discourse, style over substance, all sizzle, no steak. Perhaps. But in some ways, this horse has already left the barn. Remember, I've argued that today's epistemology is sensual. The impact a speaker makes on a general audience will be felt more here than reasoned here. And as the late Neil Postman said in his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, being engaged now is synonymous with being entertained. And if you're not familiar with Neil Postman, just remember what Maya Angelou said. People forget the words you speak to them, but they remember how you made them feel. I said earlier, I was taking you someplace. Well, we've arrived. And it starts like this. Formality in public speaking for the sake of tradition, convenience, fear, or complacency is a prison. The use of techniques that don't promote authentic communication is just artifice. It is no longer sufficient to share meaning with a narrow few. For those who teach or practice public speaking, that includes most of you out there and everyone who has come up here today. We stand at the center of what is and at the very edge of what's next. And this position requires us to understand that audiences are dynamic. There are audiences who want to be moved emotionally, audiences who want to be challenged intellectually, audiences who want to be informed, audiences who want to be entertained, audiences who want to feel, audiences who want to think, and audiences who want all of this at the same time. If we wish to keep public speaking genuinely public, the challenge is to develop forms as dynamic and diverse as the audience we seek to serve. As a public speaker and an instructor of public speaking, I can't, like some Don Quixote, tilted windmills that represent a changing public. As public speakers, ours is to literally turn into the skill that is public dynamism. To this aim, public speakers should develop new forms and new techniques to effectively communicate, no matter the audience, no matter the channel, no matter the epistemology. And like the great artists that we are, this should start by stealing a page out of a math book. It's been great journeying with you. Kelly.
Thank you, man. So now I got to follow the public speaker instructor. But, I think what he illustrated with us too is public